Now, BBC Two, Andrew Neils at the Dispatch Box.
Tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. That was his promise. Now the Prime Minister seems to think that the legal system itself is at the root of one of the biggest problems facing his government and our society. Good evening, welcome to The Box, your very own late-night no-spin zone. Tony Blair today promised to make a bonfire of the rules and regulations which many people think have allowed lawyers to make a mockery of justice. The police should be pleased. They've long complained about the attitude of the courts. Cases collapse on technical points. Known criminals get out on bail. Sentences are too lenient. The biggest miscarriage of justice, said the Prime Minister today is when the guilty walk away unpunished. So are frontline officers finally getting the support they need to bring more offenders to book? Norman Brennan has been a policeman for more than 20 years. He now combines being a London bobby with running the Victims of Crime Trust. I'm also joined by Vera Baird. She's a Labour MP, but she's also a QC, which means she's a senior lawyer. We'll be talking to them in just a minute. But first, let's go to Linda McDougall, looking at tomorrow's papers. And I wonder what story we're going to be talking about, Linda.
Well, tough on wives, tough on sayings of wives. Cherie.
Cherie, and of course you are the unauthorised biographer.
And until now, the person she was probably most frightened of for turning up and criticising her. But it just so happens that today I'm very sympathetic.
The Daily Mail here, Cherie,
well,
bomb, gaff, fury.
Right.
Good tabloid headline.
It is, and Cherie denies backing terror. So, yeah. What Cherie did was she went with the Queen of Jordan and they were at a Palestinian charity, and Mrs. Blair said, as long as young people feel they've got no hope but to blow themselves up, you are never going to make progress. Now, a perfectly understandable statement, I think, but it's been taken on board, first of all, by Michael Ancram, who pronounced everybody mortally offended that she hadn't thought to say on a day when so many Israelis had been
19,
yes.
Many of them children, dead from a suicide bomber.
Exactly. Now, I mean, I would think that it goes without saying that Cherie, who is obviously a sympathetic person, had meant this, but it has caused a huge row. And it's, I mean, here in the Times there's an amazing cartoon of Cherie as a suicide bomber. It about to be ignited by what looks suspiciously like Jack Straw.
I can't make out if it's Jack Straw or Tony Blair.
No.
I mean, you've studied the Prime Minister's wife. Is she a long-time supporter of the PLO?
Well, I don't think that, of course she's not. I don't think that
Isn't she?
has, not to my knowledge, no. Absolutely not. I wouldn't have said she had any strong views, but I'd be guessing. I mean, if somebody finds that she's got a supporters badge under her bed tomorrow morning, then I'm wrong. Because
the remark was really part that it's because of these grievances that people drive themselves to do this.
Well, everyone's over-interpreting it. I think it was a simple, sympathetic remark made by a worried mum. But
it was sympathetic to the PLO, not to the mothers who are today burying their kids.
I think it was sympathetic to desperate kids.
Supposing
I cannot believe she meant any harm.
Supposing the IRA had blown up a London restaurant, as they have done, and many were killed, and the wife of the Israeli Prime Minister said the same thing of the IRA.
Well, I don't think you can... See, that's obviously where I'm failing. You're all putting it in such a context.
I'm just asking the question.
I think the context that it goes in is right along the end there. Marianne Sieghart talks about the row at Downing Street, and I think that people have been so sensitised this week over Blackrod, Alistair Campbell.
It's certainly something the Prime Minister could have done without today.
This has tacked itself on, and there seems to be all hell let loose in Downing
But you see, she is assuming that it is the helpless grievance of the PLO or Palestinians that drives them to do something like this. Even if they were so helpless, it's a question about whether it justifies you taking the life of innocent kids. But we know this chap was studying Islam at a university. He could have been, he might not be helpless, but have been brainwashed by Islamo-fascists.
I think you all know a lot more than, well, certainly than I do, and maybe even more than Cherie, who's a generalist, I should suspect, on this subject too. And the most I would allow is that maybe it was a careless remark, but I would say this woman isn't a politician. She's not here to answer, and I think she made a sympathetic and warm remark, but for that, She's become part of the Downing Street machine. Trevor Kavanagh says, I think we should tell you that Sherry is exceptionally clever and surprisingly daft.
All right. That's the story that dominates the papers, but you'll come back and tell us what else is making the news.
I will.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Linda. Now, if speeches and Home Office initiatives made any difference, Britain wouldn't have a crime problem at all. But despite 5 years of tough talking from ministers, the figures remain obstinately high. What really worries Labour now is that it's failed, quote, its own people. Those really suffering are residents on estates where drug dealing, burglary and vandalism are rife. We visited such an estate in London to see firsthand just what they're up against.
We've got vandalism of cars. We've had dump cars put on the estate. We've also got drug dealers around on the estate as well. We should have about 8 or 9 so far. We are constantly fighting a losing battle. 3 years ago, we had Myrtle Walk vandalism on it every day of the week. The tenants got so fed up. We've had to put a security gate in front of their doors. So they look like they're caged in now to stop the vandalism of their own property. Cars were broken into, lights were smashed, windows were smashed. No matter where we went, there was always graffiti and vandalism on the estate. And it still happens. We get the drug dealers in court. And within 2 to 3 days, they're let out again because there's not enough evidence. People are frightened to give evidence. And that's why it takes so long. Then when you do finally get them out, another drug dealer moves in. So we've got the problem all over again. It's not just us, it's the tenants that live on the estate that are fighting. We had this problem with a young boy on the estate when his little gang, and after persistence of 2 years, we finally got him taken to court and finally had him banned off the estates and surrounding estates that he was reoffending on. He was always stealing cars, setting fire to them, openly taking dope, and he was just making a nuisance of himself. So we're glad to say that it's one person has made a difference, and hoping we can do it again with someone else. You can't be 100% accurate on getting rid of the drug dealers. There's always someone else to take their place. So I don't think in the long term we can always get rid of them, but we will keep trying. And that's being positive about it. We have to keep trying.
Well, one brave, frustrated voice there from the front line on crime. Vera Baird, the system has gone too far in favour of the defendant, or the criminal, and the Prime Minister is right to rebalance it in favour of the victim and justice.
Well, you only put onto your introduction about a quarter of what the speech consisted of, and there is much more to be said. The principal thrust of his argument is that the court system is grossly inefficient, and I think everybody who's worked in it for a long time has known from their own anecdotal little area that that's so. But it's taken Lord Justice Old, set up by this government, and it's taken yesterday's Audit Commission to show just how bad it is and how much the court system is letting down
well, actually,
women
the principal
like that.
thrust, what he says that one of the reasons why it's like this is because of the inefficiencies of the court system.
Yes,
but the principle behind his argument, I've read the whole speech, the principle behind his speech is that the system has gone too far in favour of the criminal.
Well, I simply don't agree with you. He doesn't.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's what the Prime Minister says.
No, you're misrepresenting what he said. He says in one place that the system needs rebalancing, and he gives some specific examples. For instance, getting rid of the rule against double jeopardy, which very few people are critical of. For instance, not allowing known criminals to have bail, something you featured yourself. Everyone agrees with that. Why known criminals sometimes get bail is because the police are very slow to rack up onto the police national computer their previous convictions. If you read the Audit Commission report,
I have.
If you read the trails that go through the case of Darren, who is a typical case of a man arrested, he is taken to the police station. They look up his previous convictions so the custody sergeant can make a rational decision about bail. They don't find that he's up the next day in the adjacent magistrates' court, because that's not there. They don't find 2 convictions for absconding, which the police haven't had time to put on. And so they bail him and he goes out and commits another offence.
But according to the Audit Commission...
These things we all agree should stop.
Right. Well, I mean, the Prime Minister does say, let's just get this on the record here. He says that The criminal system is unbalanced in favour of criminals. The biggest injustice is when the guilty walk away. It happens too often. The Audit Commission says
Do you know, I
that
don't recognise those precise
only
quotes at all.
6% of reported crimes result in a conviction. If that's the case, we have a far bigger problem of the guilty getting off scot-free than of unsafe convictions.
Well, you have to, of course, you have to look at the real issues. The first huge dropout, there are 5.2 million offences committed, according to the Audit Commission, and 340,000...
6%.
Yeah, but that's just, you can't say 6%. 340,000...
Well, the Audit Commission does.
340,000 individuals convicted. Yeah. If you rounded that up to 52,000, 520,000, it would be 10% of the total.
Hold on, if you commit the Audit Commission says if you commit a crime, you have only 1 in 16 chance of being convicted.
Yes.
1 in 16. That makes being a criminal in this country a risk-free occupation.
No, listen, how many are reported? Those which are reported, the 22% detection rate is the first fallout. So 78% of crimes are simply not detected at all. Well, that's got little to do with lawyers.
And Dennis, I've not come on to who's to blame. I'm just simply trying to establish at the moment that if you're a criminal in Britain, you have a 1 in 16 chance of being convicted, and therefore that's not a bad occupation to be in.
I think you all together missing out the steps that the government's already taken to try to improve this, and the attempts
crime's
it's having.
Rising. The latest figures show a rising crime.
No, 22% decrease in crime between 1997 and now, and an increase last year in street crime
of 6%. No burglaries as well. The figures show not just street crime. You need to read these things to get the facts.
I think you really have to get your facts correct.
Norman Brennan, the government might not be talking this Labour MP's language, but he's talking your language now. Are you encouraged?
No, I'm not. I've been a police officer for 24 years, and I've campaigned on behalf of my frontline colleagues for 10 at the highest level in this country. I've also been the senior executive of the Victims of Crime Trust for 8 years, so I have an idea what I'm talking about. I've listened to both parties. When this government came to power, the slogan was tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. I welcomed a new government. I actually welcomed new government.
No, I understand. I don't want a history of it. But what I'd like you to do is to answer the question. He's now talking your language I'm putting to you. Why are you not encouraged by this? He's saying the system needs to be rebalanced in favour of the victim.
OK, I'll tell you why. When this government came to power, there was problems with children, so they brought in child curfews, an absolute disaster. These children then got so out of hand, they were committing so many crimes in their area, the Prime Minister came out with antisocial behavioural orders, an absolute disaster, almost impossible to implement. Many of these youngsters and others then went on to burglary and were committing huge numbers of burglaries. Then came in the 3 strikes and you're out. You remember it, much lauded, much applauded.
Taken from America.
Not one single 3 strikes and you're out has been given. 2 strikes and you're out for life imprisonable offences. You only have to look at the headlines yesterday. It means 2 years or 3 or 4 years.
So are you saying this is just are you saying then that this speech today is just another initiative, a soundbite with no substance?
I believe it's just strong words but no actions, just like the Home Secretary. I'm afraid David Blunkett and also Jack Straw are 2 of the worst Home Secretaries I've ever known. I'm not politically motivated.
OK, what do you say to that view?
Well, each argument he's put forward I could counter in turn.
Well,
but I don't
do it
think,
in general terms.
Well, I don't think that we ought to be talking about victims as opposed to defendants. I think what we ought to be looking at... No, not. We should not be saying you have to make defendants' circumstances worse to help victims. Look, one woman who's a victim today, her son may be a defendant tomorrow. Victims want a fair system of justice as much as defendants do.
If he's guilty, it doesn't matter whether he's a son or not. He should go down.
Of course he doesn't.
And at the moment in this system, he doesn't.
Andrew, you want him to be fairly tried, as you would want yourself to be fairly
No, but my
tried.
point is that the issue is not unfair trials. When only 6% of criminals are being convicted, the problem is that, as the Prime Minister said today, the biggest injustice in Britain is that the guilty get off free.
Sure. Well, if you're moving away from what you were starting to do, which was to attack really the way the criminal justice system has been bent systematically in favour of the defendants, then let's get on to the same theme, which is how do we detect more crime? Now, the police are at the highest numbers they've ever been. They're coming up to our target of 130,000. In addition, as you know, everybody supports the moves David Blunkett, much criticised, but nonetheless backed by almost 100% of the police and the opposition is doing, to introduce escort officers, community support officers, investigation officers, and custody officers who will be trained in those bits of a police officer's skills for which the police officer doesn't need to be involved. That will increase hugely the amount of time that a police officer can be on.
Let's not beat
right,
around the
the
bush.
didn't like that, Norman Brennan. Why not?
The criminal justice system is in absolute crisis. If it was any different, I would tell you. The police have no faith in the criminal justice system. The public have no faith in the criminal justice system. The poor victims, the ones that are on their knees, they look up and it's only then that they know how lonely it is to be a victim of crime, when there's nobody to pick them up. If you're a criminal, believe you me, there are dozens of organisations that are well funded, that have chief executives like myself, and they know how to look after the offender.
Why
when it comes to looking after the victims, nobody cares.
Why are the public losing confidence in the
Because
police?
they don't see police officers on the beat. They don't see police officers on the beat. They don't see offenders being arrested. And when offenders are arrested, and they have actually been brave enough to give evidence in court, they're often shoddily treated by very cute and professional lawyers. We understand they've got a job to do. But at the end of the day, I was on a robbery squad once, and you realise that some of the defendants were represented by the same lawyers time and time again, and they used the same defence to fool yet another jury. Yet we knew they were as guilty as the day is long.
Well, all right, I think many people will accept the role of some lawyers in this. Some wouldn't argue with you on that. But that woman we spoke to today, in an area like that, what she said to us was that if you look out of our estate, every now and then you might see a police car going past. You never see the police on foot walking through the estate.
Isn't this another reason why community support officers are a super idea?
Well, let's see what the answer is. I'll come to you in a second, but what's the answer to that? Why not?
Why didn't anybody listen to Sir Kenneth Newman when he actually retired? His retirement speech as the Commissioner in 1986 was to say, the crime level I have in the Met Police now, I need 33,000 officers. He had 25 at the time. Why didn't anybody listen to him? Community beat officers, they're no good. When they start getting a good hiding, the limited officers, us full-time officers, will have to be going and dealing with that. What the public want is to see a uniform on the beat. They then can interact with that uniformed officer, and we then in turn can use specialist units to target those that are making their lives a nightmare. It's not happening.
Vera Baird, would you really like to see community officers in an estate like that rather than fully trained policemen and women?
Of course, as long as they've got the required skills, and they will be trained by the police to the required level. Let me tell you about estates resembling that in my
the people in that estate have got
constituency.
knives and guns.
Let me tell you about the wardens we've got in my constituency, who are actually local authority wardens, that they resemble very closely the community support officers who are coming in. They are able, by doing a lot of low-level but hugely important work, like helping to stamp out litter, like stopping kids from ganging together and causing aggravation, like stopping dog fouling, like reporting things that are broken so they can be fixed. They are able to get to know the community and to get its confidence.
Do they patrol in estates like that?
They do, and they're given information.
Are you sure?
That helps.
Are we categorical about this?
Let me take you to South Bank and to Grangetown in my constituency.
But they are there patrolling in estates where people are armed and with knives and up to here and crack cocaine?
Well, let's just keep calm about what these estates are like.
I'm perfectly calm. I'm trying to get an answer from you.
You're getting plenty of answers from me, Andrew. Let's just keep our feet on the ground. If a police officer's on the beat dealing with some small matter, and there is a more important matter elsewhere, he'll be whipped away. The community support officer and the warden will not. He'll be able to stay there. He'll be able to be there all the time. He'll get a much better picture of the estate.
What's your answer to that?
No. What we want is this government to invest in full-time police officers. And that is the only way we will tackle the problem. Now, as you said earlier on, there was 5.2 million crimes reported, okay? Yeah. The British Crime Survey in 1998 said that only 1 in 3 crimes are reported. If every victim actually reported their crime, the criminal justice system would collapse. If you want 2 answers at how to get proper full-time officers on the beat, here's a suggestion to take back to Tony Blair. Reduce our paperwork, bureaucracy, political correctness.
Exactly what these kinds of
let me finish to say. Well, let me finish what I'm saying.
Give us another one. Give us another one.
Then you'll have 50% more police officers on the beat. And these people that are lucky enough to be granted bail, having committed a street robbery or a burglary once, should they commit another one while they're on bail, remand them in custody, so my colleagues don't have to arrest them earlys, lates and nights, time and time again. We can then spend our time on the beat, reassuring the public. Then maybe Tony Blair will start having the support of the British public, because at this moment in time, I tell you what, the police and the British public and victims of crime hold him in contempt.
All right,
and that is the honest truth.
No, they don't. Norman, you're you're a British Transport Police officer and you're not a member of the Metropolitan Police.
Protect the Protectors represents tens of thousands of frontline officers, and Tony Blair knows that. Don't try and dismiss me. I'm a frontline policeman.
All right,
You're getting extra powers in the police reform bill to help. You're forced to come in to help police officers too. That means we are swelling the numbers of people with general policing powers from the entirety of your force.
The BTP already has that. What about all the other forces?
That's a step nobody's ever thought of doing before, and it's a huge step toward increasing the numbers of properly trained police officers like you on the beat.
So why is
now,
the court system? I mean, the court system seems to be riddled with as many restrictive practices as the print unions before Wapping. Why did we let it get to that?
I don't know that it's quite that, but certainly...
Seems to be £80 million wasted on delays?
Yeah, Old found that there were 64 pieces of law that related to evidence and procedure, as well as lots of statutory instruments. There are...
Can it be reformed?
Of course it can, and it has to be, and that's what the government's about now.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Now let's go back to the rest of what was making the news here in Westminster. And Washington came to Westminster today. For the first time ever, an American congressional committee, which this country holds in high esteem, held a session here in Parliament. Maybe we learned something from it. They were taking evidence from a number of British witnesses about Gulf War syndrome. About 5,000 British veterans of the Gulf War are said to have been affected by the mysterious illness. The number of American servicemen with war-related health problems is far higher. The US government has set up a full inquiry. Representatives of the British victims want the same.
I suspect we may never know what happened to our people 11 years ago during Desert Storm. But I do know this. The men and women of our armed forces have always been willing to make the ultimate sacrifice and give their lives in the service of their country. But with the Gulf War long over, many are still making that ultimate sacrifice. In the aftermath of a conflict, some of our political leaders are all too quick to attach themselves to the armed forces and to bask in their glory. So in peace, I would hope for much more from the politicians that are so ready to send them to war.
Right from the beginning, we felt we were stonewalled. People didn't want to, in government and the MOD, didn't really want to listen to us, hoping that we would possibly go away and not be a further pain to them. However, we've continued the fight, and gradually we feel we've really made tremendous progress.
I'm an optimist, and obviously you are, because you keep fighting for what you believe in. And I really believe that with the things that are going on here now in Parliament, you're going to see some and if you continue the good fight, you're going to see some very, very positive things happen here.
Over in the Commons, the main debate was on Europe. Inevitably, the issue of asylum dominated, with the Foreign Secretary calling for a common policy among the member states and a uniformly tough approach.
It's not about the creation of a fortress Europe. Immigration has made and continues to make a vital contribution to European cultural and economic life. But what we, I think, all now recognise that if we fail to manage the flow of illegal immigration and of unfounded asylum seekers, we risk destroying the consensus that we should provide refuge for those genuinely fleeing persecution. And we've seen in recent months some politicians on the far right who've been only too willing across Europe to exploit this issue for electoral gain.
Along with seeking a workable common approach, I do welcome the government's plans to discuss the implementation of bilateral agreements such as that which we had with France up until 1997. We've been calling for this for the last 8 months.
I do believe that addressing these issues, taking them head on, having a proper debate about them, formulating balanced and sensible policies is the only way to head off creeping xenophobia in Europe. And I don't believe that formulating policies of this kind need or should conflict with the liberal and humanitarian values that quite rightly we uphold.
Finally, the people of Gibraltar have made it pretty clear how they feel about the possibility of living under joint British and Spanish sovereignty. Talks between the two governments are still going on, but many MPs have already taken up the Gibraltarians' cause.
They are not proud to be a political football of the United Kingdom and Spanish governments. They are proud to be British. And I find it astonishing that the minister or any member of any British government cannot actually understand that fact.
The opposition don't care about the British interest. They aren't even interested in a serious debate. Could this be because Gibraltar is the only place left on earth where anyone is pleased to see the right honourable member for Chingford? I quote from the Daily Mail, not usually a source of support for this government, as they reported the leader of the opposition's recent visit to Gibraltar. And I quote, "This is little short of a political paradise for Ian Duncan Smith. Hugged and kissed at every turn, hailed as a saviour by all he meets, pursued across sun-swept squares by a cheering mob of Union flag wavers. He would be lucky to get a welcome like this at his own birthday party at a Tory party conference, let alone walking down a street. There's only one slight problem. This lot can't vote."
Well, he's not yet anyway. Linda McDougall is back with a Cherie Blair free review of the papers now.
Honest Dave Plunkett.
Honest Dave?
Honest Dave. Now, this policy will self-destruct in 5 seconds, as you
Mission
know.
impossible.
Absolutely. Dave today, his son Huey, little Huey, 24, said, "Dad, you mustn't go ahead with this email thing."
Ah.
So the Snoopers Charter, Dad got on the radio and said, "You know, I'm an honest man. No, I'm going to..."
I was wrong.
Oh, I know when I'm wrong. Yeah.
Well, we're glad to hear it.
Yes. The rest of the stories are all variations on people can see there's trouble at number 10 and who can take advantage of it. Michael Brown says, can the Tories take advantage of it?
Right.
And he also speculates about the growing number of angry Labour backbenchers.
They're probably more dangerous than the Tories to number 10.
I think so. I think so, perhaps in the autumn. And then there's a suggestion from others that the row with Black Rod, the famous row with Black Rod, may mean that they'll have to delay the Euro referendum because that people are not in the mood for it.
Partly because Mr. Blair maybe doesn't have quite the authority now that he thought he would have to swing public opinion behind the Euro.
Absolutely. Brown says that in a Channel 4 Powerhouse survey, 78% of the public are now worried about whether the government's
What's Channel 4?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll move on then.
But I didn't mention it at the beginning because I'd not heard of it, but there you go.
No, I've not heard of Channel 4
I'd like to mention Vodafone, though.
Yes, I would too.
Last week, they cut my phone off because I owed them £13.09.
And as a result, the CEO is getting £1.5 million.
I wondered what they wanted that 13 quid for. Now I know.
This isn't the principle that the more you destroy a share price, the bigger a bonus you get if you're the boss.
Absolutely.
I wish we ran like that.
Yeah.
A man who leaves no footprints, Gordon Brown.
This is the Prince across the... What is it? The
Prince across the water.
Yes.
Indeed.
Perhaps, yes. I mean, he seems to be the person whose light is glowing most this week.
So we should be investing in Browns and selling Blairs?
I think so.
And there we go, your stock market
Browns
tip
are bears.
from Westminster tonight. That's all for this evening. The Thursday press gang, always unpredictable, indeed so unpredictable that they're going to be here tomorrow night, Wednesday. I know you won't want to miss them. I will, but I've got to be here anyway. I hope you will too. Bye-bye.